Previously on Winnie the Pooh, written by A. Milne and read by M.V.P.Knight.
And we will call this Pooh Corner, and we will build an Eeyore house with sticks at Pooh Corner for Eeyore.
He's setting up Eeyore in a place he's calling Pooh Corner, so that he'll always know who his landlord is. Christopher Robin should tell them what he said about them having no brains, just fluff thrown in by mistake. If I was Pooh, I'd destroy the house I made for him. Chapter 2, in which Tigger comes to the forest and has breakfast. You might remember that Tigger wasn't in the original book. This is his first appearance, so he wasn't public domain before, but he is now, in case you wanted to make your own version of Winnie the Pooh or something. Winnie the Pooh woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and listened. Then he got out of bed and lit his candle, and stumped across the room to see if anyone was trying to get into his honey cupboard. And they weren't, so he stumped back again, blew out his candle, and got into bed. Then he heard the noise again.
"Is that you, Piglet?"
he said, but it wasn't.
"Come in, Christopher Robin,"
he said, but Christopher Robin didn't.
"Tell me about it tomorrow, Eeyore,"
said Pooh sleepily, but the noise went on. Now is a good time to remind you that the original version of Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain, but the Disney version is not in the public domain. So I'm going to be doing a very different voice, so do not judge this based on its similarities or lack thereof to the Disney version. Wara 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 wara, said whatever it was, and Pooh found that he wasn't asleep at all.
"What can it be?"
he thought.
"There's lots of noises in the forest, but this is a different one. This isn't a growl, and it isn't a purr, and it isn't a bark, and it isn't the noise you make before beginning a piece of poetry, but it's a noise of some kind, made by a strange animal, and he's making it outside my door. So I shall get up and ask him not to do it."
He got out of bed and opened his front door.
"Hello,"
said Pooh, in case there was anything outside. "Hello," said whatever it was.
"Oh,"
said Pooh.
"Hello."
"Hello."
"Oh, there you are,"
said Pooh.
"Hello."
"Hello," said the strange animal, wondering how long this was going on. Pooh was going to say, "Hello," for the fourth time, when he thought that he wouldn't. So he said,
"Who is it?"
instead. "Me," said the voice.
"Oh,"
said Pooh.
"Well, come here."
So whatever it was came here, and in the lights of the candle, he and Pooh looked at each other.
"I'm Pooh,"
said Pooh. "I'm Tigger," said Tigger. The last time they met someone new, they kidnapped her baby and tried to make her leave forever. Hopefully this doesn't go similarly.
"Oh,"
said Pooh, for he had never seen an animal like this before.
"Does Christopher Robin know about you?"
"Of course he does," said Tigger.
"Well,"
said Pooh,
"it's the middle of the night, which is a good time for going to sleep.
"And tomorrow morning we'll have some honey for breakfast. Do Tiggers like honey?"
"They like everything," said Tigger cheerfully.
"Then if they like to sleep on the floor, I'll go back to bed, and we'll do things in the morning. Good night."
And he got back into bed and went fast asleep. This would be so bizarre in real life. This random stranger knocks on the door, you let him in and invite him to sleep on the floor and have breakfast with you the next morning. As he awoke in the morning, the first thing he saw was Tigger, sitting in front of the glass and looking at himself.
"Hello,"
said Pooh. "Hello," said Tigger. "I found someone just like me. I thought I was the only one of them." Pooh got out of bed and began to explain what a looking glass was, but just as he was getting to the interesting part, Tigger said, "Excuse me a moment, but there's something climbing up your table." And with one loud wara 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 wara, he jumped at the end of the table, pulled it to the ground, wrapped himself up in it 3 times, rolled to the other end of the room, and, after a terrible struggle, got his head into the daylight again, and said cheerfully, "Have I won?"
"That's my tablecloth,"
said Pooh as he began to unwind Tigger. "I wonder what it was," said Tigger.
"It goes on the table, and you put things on it."
"Then why did it try to bite me when I wasn't looking?"
"I don't think it did,"
said Pooh. I tried, said Tigger, but I was too quick for it. Pooh put the cloth back on the table, and he put a large honey pot on the cloth, and they sat down to breakfast. And as soon as he sat down, Tigger took a large mouthful of honey. And he looked up at the ceiling with his head on his side, and made exploring noises with his tongue, and considering noises, and what have we got here noises. And then he said in a very decided voice, Tiggers don't like honey.
Oh,
Said Pooh, and he tried to make it sound sad and regretful.
I thought they liked everything.
Everything except honey, said Tigger. Pooh felt rather pleased about this, and said that as soon as he had finished his own breakfast, he would take Tigger round to Piglet's house, and Tigger could try some of Piglet's haycorns. Thank you, Pooh, said Tigger, because haycorns is really what Tiggers like best. So after breakfast, they went round to see Piglet, and Pooh explained as they went that Piglet was a very small animal who didn't like bouncing, and asked Tigger to not be too bouncy just at first. And Tigger, who had been hiding behind trees and jumping out on Pooh's shadow when it wasn't looking, said that Tiggers were only bouncy before breakfast, and that as soon as they had had a few haycorns, they became quiet and refined. So by and by, they knocked at the door of Piglet's house.
Hello, Pooh.
Hello, Piglet. This is Tigger.
Oh, is it?
Said Piglet, and he edged round to the other side of the table.
I thought Tiggers were smaller than that.
Not the big ones, said Tigger.
They like haycorns. So that's what we've come for. Poor Tigger hasn't had any breakfast yet.
Piglet pushed the bowl of haycorns toward Tigger and said,
Help yourself.
and then he got up close to Pooh and felt much braver and said,
So you're Tigger? Well, well.
in a careless sort of voice. But Tigger said nothing because his mouth was full of haycorns. After a long munching noise, he said, You're oars. And when Pooh and Piglet said, What? He said, Scoozy, and went outside for a moment. When he came back, he said firmly, Tiggers don't like haycorns.
But you said you liked everything except honey,
said Pooh. Everything except honey and haycorns, explained Tigger. When he heard this, Pooh said,
Oh, I see.
And Piglet, who was rather glad that Tiggers don't like haycorns, said,
What about thistles?
Thistles, said Tigger, is what Tiggers like best.
Then let's go along and see Eeyore,
said Piglet. So the three of them went. And after they had walked and walked and walked, they came to the part of the forest where Eeyore was.
Hello, Eeyore,
said Pooh.
This is Tigger.
What is? said Eeyore.
This,
explained Pooh and Piglet together, and Tigger smiled his happiest smile and said nothing. Eeyore walked all around Tigger one way and then turned and walked around him the other way. What did you say it was? he asked.
Tigger.
Ah, said Eeyore.
He's just come,
explained Piglet. Ah, said Eeyore again. He thought for a long time and then said, When is he going? You don't expect this guy Jin to stay for long, do you? When is he going? Pooh explained to Eeyore that Tigger was a great friend of Christopher Robin's, who had come to stay in the forest, and Piglet explained to Tigger that he mustn't mind what Eeyore said, because he was always gloomy. And Eeyore explained to Piglet that, on the contrary, he was feeling particularly cheerful this morning. And Tigger explained to everyone who was listening that he hadn't had any breakfast yet.
I knew there was something,
said Pooh.
Tiggers always eat thistles, so that was why we came to see you, Eeyore.
Don't mention it, Pooh.
Oh, Eeyore, I didn't mean that I didn't want to see you.
Quite. But your stripy friend, naturally, he wants his breakfast. What did you say his name was?
Tigger.
Then come this way, Tigger. Eeyore led the way to the most thistly-looking patch of thistles that ever was, and waved a hoof at it. A little patch I was keeping for my birthday, he said. But after all, what are birthdays? Here today and gone tomorrow. Help yourself, Tigger. Tigger thanked him and looked a little anxiously at Pooh. Are these really thistles? He whispered.
Yes,
Said Pooh. What Tiggers like best?
that's right.
I see, said Tigger. So he took a large mouthful and he gave a large crunch. Ow, said Tigger. He sat down and put his paw in his mouth.
What's the matter?
Asked Pooh. Mumbled Tigger. Your friend, said Eeyore, appears to have bitten on a bee. Pooh's friend stopped shaking his head to get the prickles out and explained that Tiggers didn't like thistles. Then why bend a perfectly good one? Asked Eeyore.
But you said,
Pooh began.
you said that Tiggers liked everything except honey and acorns.
And thistles, said Tigger, who was now running around in circles with his tongue hanging out. Pooh looked at him sadly.
What are we going to do?
He asked Piglet. Piglet knew the answer to that, and he said at once that they must go and see Christopher Robin. You'll find him with Kanga, said Eeyore. He came close to Pooh and said in a loud whisper, Could you ask your friend to do his exercises somewhere else? I shall be having lunch directly, and don't want it bouncing on just before I begin. A trifle matter and fussy of me, but we all have our little ways. Pooh nodded solemnly and called to Tigger.
Come along, and we'll go and see Kanga. She's sure to have lots of breakfast for you.
Tigger finished his last circle and came up to Pooh and Piglet. Hot, he explained with a large and friendly smile. I know it's supposed to mean that his tongue is hurting, but I'm just going to pretend that what he meant was the idea of him being introduced to Kanga is hot.
We'll introduce you to Kanga.
That's hot. Come on. And he rushed off. Pooh and Piglet walked slowly after him, and as they walked, Piglet said nothing, because he couldn't think of anything. And Pooh said nothing, because he was thinking of a poem. And when he had thought of it, he began.
If he never eats nothing, he'll never get bigger. He doesn't like honey and acorns and thistles, because of the taste and because of the bristles. And all the good things which an animal likes have the wrong sort of swallow, or too many spikes.
He's quite big enough anyhow,
said Piglet.
He isn't really very big.
Well, he seems so.
Pooh was thoughtful when he heard this, and then he mumbled to himself,
But whatever his weight in pounds, shillings and ounces, he always seems bigger because of his bounces. And that's the whole poem. You like it, Piglet?
All except the shillings. I don't think they ought to be there.
The pounds and ounces were all right to include, but the shillings are too British for this British author to include.
They wanted to come in after the pounds,
Explained Pooh.
so let them. It is the best way to write poetry, letting things come.
Oh, I didn't know,
said Piglet. Tigger had been bouncing in front of them all this time, turning around every now and then to ask, Is this the way? And now at last they came in sight of Kanga's house, and there was Christopher Robin. Tigger rushed up to him. Oh, there you are, Tigger, said Christopher Robin. I knew you'd be somewhere. I've been finding things in the forest, said Tigger importantly. I've found a Pooh and a Piglet and an Eeyore, but I can't find any breakfast. Pooh and Piglet came up and hugged Christopher Robin and explained what had happened.
Do you know what Tigger's like?
Asked Pooh. I expect if I thought very hard I should, said Christopher Robin, but I thought Tigger knew. I do, said Tigger. Everything there is in the world except honey and acorns and... what were those hot things called?
Thistles.
Yes, and those. Oh, well, Kanga can give you some breakfast. So they went into Kanga's house, and when Roo had said, Hello, Pooh, and Hello, Rabbit, once, and Hello, Tigger, twice, because he had never said it before, and it sounded funny, they told Kanga what they wanted, and Kanga said very kindly, Well, look in my cupboard, Tigger dear, and see what you'd like. Because she knew at once that, however big Tigger seemed to be, he wanted as much kindness as Roo. She invited Tigger to pick what he'd like to eat out of the cupboard. I wonder if she'd be able to fit herself in the cupboard. Also, that is how Tigger met his future wife. probably. I know the obvious pairing would be Tigger and Pooh because they're the two most iconic characters, but I always thought that Tigger had sort of a surrogate father thing with Roo. So the fitting choice would be Kanga. Of course, that's going off of the animated version, though. I guess we'll find out if he has that surrogate father thing in the book.
Shall I look too?
Said Pooh, who was beginning to feel a little 11 o'clock-ish, and he found a small tin of condensed milk. And something seemed to tell him that Tiggers don't like this. So he took it into a corner by itself and went with it to see that nobody interrupted it. But the more Tigger put his nose into this and his paw into that, the more things he found which Tiggers didn't like. And when he had found everything in the cupboard and couldn't eat any of it, he said to Kanga, "What happens now?" But Kanga and Christopher Robin and Piglet were all standing round Roo, watching him have his extract of malt. And Roo was saying, "Must I?" And Kanga was saying, "Now, Roo, dear, you remember what you promised." "What is it?" whispered Tigger to Piglet.
His strengthening medicine.
Said Piglet.
He hates it.
So Tigger came closer, and he leant over the back of Roo's chair, and suddenly he put out his tongue, and took one large gullope. With a sudden jump of surprise, Kanga said, "Oh!" and then clutched at the spoon again just as it was disappearing, and pulled it safely back out of Tigger's mouth. But the extract of malt had gone. "Tigger, dear," said Kanga.
"He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine! He's taken my medicine!"
sang Roo happily, thinking it was a tremendous joke. Then Tigger looked up at the ceiling and closed his eyes, and his tongue went round and round his chops, in case he had left any outside, and a peaceful smile came over his face as he said, "So that's what Tigger's like." Which explains why he had always lived at Kanga's house afterwards. And he had extract of malt for breakfast, dinner, and tea. Sure, that's why he lives at Kanga's house. For the extract of malt, of course. Well, I guess that proves what the definitive pairing is. And sometimes, when Kanga thought he wanted strengthening, he had a spoonful or two of Roo's breakfast after meals as medicine.
"But I think,"
said Piglet to Pooh,
"that he's been strengthened quite enough."